Hello and welcome to another episode of Test, Optimize, and Scale. It's a privilege to have Micah Bergdale with us here today, CEO at Jules. Going to talk all about Jules's model and what becomes available with luxury vehicles accordingly. Micah, pleasure to have you on the show here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And Micah, my team and I, we've had in-depth chats with you about how you created your model, your history, but want to familiarize the listeners a bit more on your background, your story leading into the creation of Jules.
Yeah, so my career background started at Apple at the very beginning of my career. Started a consulting company that worked in partnership with Apple, and then eventually got into a product that was specifically focused on transportation, which is really where my career led me, was creating applications specifically for transportation solutions. So we work more with the mass transit world, so buses, trains, ferries, but as the world got to be more multimodal, so ride share, car share, bike share, started to find more and more integrations around that. I was with a company called Bytemark, which I sold off to Siemens back in 2019. Stepped away for just a little bit during COVID. I had worked on a project that was specifically for artificial intelligence for parking related applications, which the parking industry ended up taking a big hit in the COVID era. So kind of abandoned that project and started getting more into EVs. The biggest need that I really saw within the marketplace was the fact that there were a lot of people that were interested in buying an EV or experience an EV, but they felt a little apprehensive, and there wasn't a good solution for helping kind of the hand-holding process that a lot of people are looking for. So they're comfortable getting behind the wheel, whether it's a Tesla or any of the other vehicles that are out there. And so really wanted to create a company that was EV exclusively focused, but really supporting customers for where they can find charging, how they charge, how they drive the vehicles, which don't necessarily drive in kind of the exact same functions of a traditional gas car. Just getting people familiar with some of these different vehicles that are out there and making sure that they feel like they can drive with confidence and potentially even turn around and buy one, which, a number of people who've rented from us have turned around and bought one of the EVs that they've experienced with us, which is great. So that was really the inspiration for it. And our model is really kind of built off of a traditional rental model, but we do use newer distribution sales channels. So Turo being a good example of that. That's actually one of our biggest drivers. But we do also work with a number of other sales channel operators, including our own website, in order to be able to offer up EVs. Within the New York City metro area right now, we had hoped for being able to expand into some other metro areas. Biggest thing is just kind of the scaling, bringing in investment, and allowing us to be able to scale. But we've had a lot of success within the New York City area.
So love it, by the way. Starting at Apple, moving into your own ventures, eventually at Bytemart and selling that, having an exit, deciding, hey, I want to focus on electric vehicles, EVs, seeing opportunity in the marketplace to create Jules, offering luxury EV rentals, familiarizing your audience base with these types of vehicles, even seeing them go on to adopt this type of technology, purchase the vehicles on their own. And it sounds like looking at other trends that are working. You mentioned Turo and how it feeds in to your model, but it's essentially being focused around electric car rentals. I like getting into the why. Why EVs? Why car rentals?
I mean, why EVs is probably just more of a sense of, personally feeling like I'm looking at all of the challenges around the transition to EVs, which I believe needs to happen because of everything that's happening in the environment, and feeling like there was a real gap of people who are very interested in driving EVs, renting EVs, but feeling, again, apprehensive about actually doing it because there was nobody really to support them. The traditional model, the Hertzes of the world, it's very much like, here's the keys, there's the car, good luck, don't call us unless there's a problem. And even if there is a problem, actually probably don't call them. So they really aren't there to support the customer. as they're going through what is a kind of major technological shift. And I really do reference back to my Apple experience, and anybody that's walked into an Apple store knows this, which is, if you're getting your hands on new technology, you want to have a place to go and a resource to turn to that you can ask just simple questions about how does this technology work. And so I really kind of build off of my retail experience that I had working with Apple, of recognizing that customers need a level of support, especially when I really call back to in the early 2000s when I was working with Apple, and you had a lot of people who were switching over from Windows to Mac. And as part of that transition, you just saw a lot of people, they wanted to do it. They liked Apple as a brand, but they were nervous and they felt like they needed that extra handholding. And it was the Apple stores that provided that extra level of handholding that made that experience very comfortable for a lot of different people. And you're talking about switching from gas cars that people have had ingrained in society for the better part of the last century. And now all of a sudden you're going to have this new form of transportation that requires a very unique way of charging vehicles and being able to fuel them up. And so I just felt like there had to be some sort of middle solution where you were able to provide that service for customers so that way they felt comfortable with it. There are a lot of, I'll give you some great examples. There's a lot of bad charging solutions that are out there in the world.
Yep.
And if you give a customer an EV and then they go to a slow charger, a charger that isn't working, they're stuck there for God only knows how long, they end up very frustrated with the entire process. And of course, they wouldn't want to rent an EV. So you want to have the holistic solution of, I'm not just giving you the car, I'm telling you where you need to go in order to be able to fuel up. Gas, car rental solutions, Hertz, obviously historically, they haven't had to worry about that. They haven't had to worry about telling a customer, here's how you charge, here's where you charge, here's how that process is going to work for you. I think Hertz can do well serving existing Tesla owners that might be looking for, hey, I already know how to drive a Tesla, I can just hop in one and go. But our market is really trying to focus on people who maybe have a little bit less experience with an EV and just want to have a little bit more handholding in that process. And we've actually started to get people, they might have been a Tesla owner for a while, but they want to try the Mercedes EQS or the BMW iX. And so we're able to not only provide that vehicle, but again, provide them solutions for where and how to charge and supporting them through their journey as part of that.
I really like that analogy of the Apple Store taking people from Windows, other devices into the Apple hardware operating software, being able to walk through some of the features, allowing that setup to be adapted towards the user, the individual's life, and really stepping into the tech's capabilities. And that same type of discussion for electric vehicles and
Yeah.
wrapping one's head around what does the charging aspect really entail for my day-to-day life. Can I
Yep.
try this vehicle out? There's a few different options. I don't want to just do a test drive. I want to get a feel for it for a couple days, and that's really what you're allowing for. It's far beyond just the you mentioned Hertz and other rental cars of here's the keys, get it back to us or we will charge you, versus here's how an electric vehicle works, use it for the time you've booked, enjoy it. And again, as you've mentioned, you're then seeing those customers turn into EV owners themselves.
Yep. And I mean, listen, you just put yourself in the shoes of that average customer. Even with, especially with the scarcity of cars and scarcity of EVs in general, there's not a lot of opportunity to even test drive, and the test drives are very limited. And so, how do you know that this vehicle is necessarily going to fit well into your day-to-day lifestyle? Well, the best way to do that is to get a little bit more multi-day experience, and that's really what we're about. And listen, New York is a great test market too, because a lot of people don't necessarily want to own a car. And so they want to just try different cars. And we've actually had people even, and this is part of our business model, they've turned around, bought an EV, and then put it into our fleet for us to manage. And the way that
Wow.
process works is, hey, I know that I'm going to drive this car maybe once or twice a month. I want to have the benefit of knowing I have this car available to me. But for those other times, I don't want to just have it collecting dust and sitting in a parking garage. Let's put some miles on it and have some revenue generated from it. And
Mhm.
so EV owners generally, they're actually making more than their payments are. And so they're able to have net revenue and have a vehicle available to them. And then we just manage the entire process for them. Because as attractive as Turo is, and some of the insights I've gotten from Turo too, that the vast majority of their business now is being driven by companies like Jules, where they're managing dozens, if not hundreds, of vehicles on the platform. And you're one-off guy that's like, I'm just going to make some extra money by renting my car on Turo. They're realizing it's not worth the hassle. It's just you have to really build a company that is doing the cleaning and the maintenance and the repairs. And if there are insurance claims, like all these different aspects of running a rental car company, that it's a huge headache if you were just doing, a few vehicles and you were just one guy and it's a side hustle. There's just too much to the business itself to think that you're just going to keep it on the side. And while it's attractive to generate revenue from an asset that everybody knows is just sitting there, a lot of folks would rather give up a larger chunk of that and just say, you, Jules, go ahead and take care of it. I don't care if you're running it on the Turo platform or wherever. Just send me the check at the end of the month and then make it available to me when I need it to have it available.
And we've heard of the benefits of the sharing economy and supporting tech, short term housing rentals, like you said, the list of obstacles that come along with it. So to hear both sides of the marketplace for vehicles, for electric vehicles, and then the utility you guys play for the renter, or for both sides, really streamlines the process. And yeah, I love the idea of testing out multiple vehicles too, being able to see how Hyundai's tech sizes up next to Kia's, try out some of the Mercedes models. And yes, the secondary market for vehicles right now, at the manufacturer level, tier one for automotive, we hear about all of the different slowdowns for production, for logistics, accessibility to vehicles, long waiting periods. So to have New Yorkers available, have these cars available for New Yorkers is huge. What does expansion look like for anyone listening in, wondering, hey, when is this coming to my city, to my state? What
Yeah.
is that model?
So we have an active WeFunder campaign that's more of a Reg CF type of raise, and people, if they are interested, they can certainly invest via that. We are also having more kind of traditional VC private equity conversations that really is focused on helping us be able to add more locations. We do have some good financing that's been lined up for the vehicles themselves. So I'm less worried about adding vehicles to our fleet. And part of that model again is going to existing EV owners or people that are interested in buying an EV and then having them just put it into the fleet. So we're able to create a structure that supports that. It's really just trying to get into how we add, a location in South Florida, a location in Southern California, just different geographies around the country that we think are very attractive, and being able to have the staffing. And our part of our model too is that we are partnered up with mall properties. Malls are actually super interesting for us because they have become some of the first properties that actually have EV charging infrastructure in place. So it means that we don't have to do the extra work of going and buying chargers and putting them in. Although we've looked at adding some of our own just as a partnership or augmenting what the malls end up having. But malls, their big concern is they want to have parking on the weekends. That's their busy
Yep.
time. They don't want to worry about that they've got these cars just sitting there taking up space. Well, if we're doing our job right, and so far we are, the cars aren't there on the weekends. So they have the extra space, but then they're generating revenue for when we need extra parking spaces, which is mostly during the week when it's a little less busy. So it ends up being a win-win for us in terms of the relationships with the malls. And I think that's going to be a big part of our expansion efforts is, looking at various mall properties around the country where it makes sense to pay on a monthly basis to have the vehicles parked there. You have built-in security. We've found a really great relationship in terms of partnering with mall security, so that way you make sure that the cars are secure, cleaning supplies and storage for it. Like it's a bit of a change of the traditional franchise model where Hertz, Avis, they'd have almost like an independent lot that would sit separate and apart, unless it was at an airport, for example. And so, I think there's more attractiveness of being at a mall property because we also get built-in advertising from that too. So we've actually picked up clients as a result of just having our cars being parked there and people being like, well, you guys are renting Teslas. Like, I would really be interested in learning more about that. So it has a lot of synergies, and I'm kind of surprised nobody's ever taken that approach before, but so far it's really worked out well for us.
And I've seen how that relationship works with Tesla charging and the business it brings to those malls. I imagine there's a lot of different advantages, and just am a big fan of that evolution of the space. We've seen retail affected here in
Yep.
Los Angeles. Read about how it's impacting other areas of the country as well too. So to be able to hear about this usage, and whether we're talking about a mall, whether we're looking at perhaps the rental industry, the electric vehicle industry, travel industry groups. What are partnerships looking like for you guys? Are there a
Mhm.
lot of businesses that are reaching out or open to some type of collaboration?
So a good example is like the auto body shop that we work with, and they've got it's a multi-generational family business that's here in the Bronx that we work with very closely. But it's a younger guy now that's taken over the business, and he has really tried to focus on the electric vehicle business. And so, if you're familiar with Revel, which is kind of like an Uber competitor here in New York City, but it's all Tesla based, that's where they end up getting their vehicles fixed, is this company called S&T. And I kind of bring them up as an example of they regularly, because they are working on EVs, will get customers who only want to rent an EV if their car's in the shop for repairs. So we get our vehicles fixed there exclusively, and then they turn around and will refer business over to us when somebody's bringing their vehicle into the shop that needs to get repaired. And so it's really a win-win opportunity for us because, again, we're generating more business, and we have a go-to partner that has an expertise in repairing and supporting EVs.
What about
I was just going to say financing companies too. I mean, we've had one, Tenant Energy, that's based here in New York City. They're exclusively focused on financing EV vehicles. And we work very, very closely with them for being able to support our financing, but also finding if somebody wants to put a vehicle into our fleet or they're looking to purchasing a vehicle, that we refer them over to Tenant Energy.
Yeah, because I imagine the overall initiative is very admirable. Other groups would likely want to tap into that as well as your customer base. The customer base as a whole, how has the process been to create an audience? Do you see a lot of social sharing occur? Is this the type of idea where someone comes in and they want to tell their friends and family about it?
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely referrals are always the easiest form of marketing, and we've received a lot of different people who have come into the business that they were just referred by somebody else who had a great experience. Our Turo ratings are 4.95, I think, or it's and I don't think we've ever received a 1 or 2 star, maybe 1 3 star. It's always annoying when you end up getting a 4 star and then somebody doesn't tell you why they give you a 4 star. But for the most part, we get really good reviews and responses from customers, and which turns around and has them, referring business over to us. And if we keep on, keeping people satisfied, I think we'll continue to get those referrals coming into us naturally.
Mhm. Well, Mike, a big fan of everything you've created here. Imagine it took a lot of trial and error to be able to get to this point. What did you test out to refine the model to market the business, both sides of the marketplace at that, or even the investor marketing that's had to take place? What have been some learnings there?
So, we wouldn't have been able to get off the ground if it hadn't been for the Start Engine campaign that I did last year. And that was our first Reg CF. It was my first experience doing a Reg CF. We raised about 525,000 approximately dollars from that campaign. And that was really the reason that we were able to get the business moving. Uh, with that said, I've noticed that the Reg CF market has kind of cooled down a bit. I think part of that is, the stock market in general has cooled down quite a bit. And so those type of retail investors are not as willing to put money into something that's a startup. And there's just a little bit less interest in that. And I know other people that are doing raises too, that they've had a little bit more challenges with that. And I think we timed it well, in that now we're in a position where we're going to a more traditional VCs, angel investors, private equity here in New York, to be able to scale up to the next level, and having the types of conversations of, all right, how do we actually take everything that we've developed so far and apply it to other markets and really turn this into a $100 million a year, maybe $1 billion a year company that can really scale up. We went from literally this week is our 1 year anniversary of getting our first vehicle. So, we've gone from that to having 45 vehicles. We're on pace right now to do about $1.2, $1.3 million a year in revenue with the existing vehicle fleet size. We think there's a little bit more margin to be squeezed out of those existing vehicles in terms of the revenue that can be generated from them. But to be at a position of a year ago having one vehicle and now being on track to have over $1 million worth of revenue, I think that demonstrates that we've built something very unique here and that has some real traction to it. And again, we need more vehicles. We need to kind of find additional places to go. We need some capital to be able to support some of that growth. But the model works well. I mean, the vehicles themselves are cash flow positive, and it's a matter of just generating enough cash flow in order to cover some of the other cost overhead that you have as a company. One thing that is unique about us, and I think this really sets us apart from, again, the Hertzes and Avises of the world, or anybody that would be hosting on Turo, we've developed a lot of our own software. And that unique software that we're using taps into Tesla's APIs, BMW's APIs, Mercedes, in order to be able to determine what's the charge level, where's the vehicle at, where's the closest charger, are there any error messages that are coming back for the car, what are restrictions that we're putting on a certain user for a specific rental. So just kind of all these unique things that we can do in this world where vehicles now are computers on wheels, and we're ingesting that data in order to tie that vehicle data with a specific booking and reservation that might exist, again, on Turo, on our website, wherever, and being able to then think about how we're managing these vehicles, how we're optimizing these vehicles, and creating a true kind of unique software solution that I think, again, really sets us up for success long term. Part of what we've looked at doing, it could be a licensing franchising model for the software as we go forward. It could be that, our service and solution just really gets bundled up and we get acquired by somebody else. But we really see the value prop in not just the vehicles themselves, but the various different pieces of software that's going to support these vehicles, because as they're already semi-autonomous, but as they become more autonomous too, the thing that is really going to set up any company for success, and I believe very strongly in terms of Jules, is to have a software solution that's helping you manage those vehicles and kind of the unique attributes of both that they're EVs, but that they're also autonomous vehicles, and how you're distributing those vehicles, managing those vehicles. So I think that that's kind of the long-term value prop that we're really trying to put together. Because a lot of people ask us, well, how are you guys really that different than Hertz or Avis? Hertz and Avis are not developing their own software in-house that's really kind of going to be the future of rentals. I mean, I think if anything, you look at Turo, they've done a phenomenal job of disrupting the industry in a way that you're finding now a lot of consumers, especially if they're millennials, Gen Z, they want to have a unique vehicle. And they want to know that they're renting that unique vehicle. They don't want to know that they're just getting a generic sedan and that whatever sedan that they're thrown into is what they get. People want to know, like, maybe the color of the vehicle. They want to know what the certain vehicle features are, and they're comfortable that it's the vehicle that they've chosen ahead of time. And I think Turo's model has really forced the Hertzes and Avises of the world to look inward and say, well, that's not going to work very well with the way that we've structured this, because when you go and book on a Hertz or an Avis, it's here's the generic sedan that is either a regular sedan or maybe it's a luxury sedan, but you really don't know what car you're getting. And a lot of people do have brand preferences and they do have feature preferences. And Turo has really opened up that capability. And so we're realizing as we develop out our software that we have to have a lot of that functionality built into how people are filtering for the vehicles that they're looking for. It's inevitable that swaps need to happen. So how do we make sure that if somebody selected one specific vehicle, that they're getting something very similar to what they already selected, and supporting them through that process? Again, Hertz is going to tell you, hey, you rented a Tesla Model 3, standard range, and sorry, we're all out, but we'll give you a Polestar, which is one of the new car companies that they've started to bring in. And so there's not a sense of like, hey, you're assigned this vehicle and that vehicle is yours because you have this reservation. Turo has really perfected that model. And I think a lot of people prefer that. I want to know that if I'm renting a specific vehicle, all the details about that specific vehicle.
As like you said, with the technology and what that allows for, and the tremendous opportunity for expansion to follow, whether it is franchising or going to different cities. I'm hoping LA comes at some point here, or just the merger and acquisition potentials, as you guys talk about in your pitch deck on your offering page, on WeFunder, and have pointed to in past pieces of content. So it's very clear, I think, relatable for listeners, anyone who drives or needs to be renting a car, has even used some of the Uber type models that you mentioned, and understand what this opens up. I've found different applications for Turo in my own life, and will certainly be seeking out what vehicles are available when I get to New York next. What about optimization? You mentioned how the software optimizes for the processes, you're optimizing the vehicles accordingly. Again, really want to emphasize how the tech is such a valuable aspect of everything that you guys are doing. And maybe for any listeners that are tuning in, they're founders for their own organizations. What steps, what approaches towards optimization do you take? You've obviously made some substantial effective shifts to get where you're at now. What is the process that you use to optimize?
I think it's looking at your daily operations and understanding where software, and really not just software, I mean, it's kind of an overused term, but the data that could potentially be helpful for somebody that's in the garage in order to make sure that a vehicle can get out the door as quickly as possible. So let's just kind of go through a real world scenario, for example. It's a Saturday. It's a very busy day. We have one customer that's returning a vehicle and another customer that's going to be picking up a vehicle. But we also have a lot of other pickups that are happening in the course of that day. The ability for somebody who is working at the garage to be able to say, okay, I see this customer is bringing this vehicle back, and I can see that the charge level is actually lower than what we would like it to be for the next customer. And we know that this is a very tight timeline for this next customer. And you might have a similar situation, but it's less of a tight timeline. So now all of a sudden you've created software that is giving the data information to say, you need to prioritize charging this vehicle over this vehicle because this vehicle is actually going to be going out sooner, and make sure that you end up getting this vehicle charged up and cleaned, so that way it's ready to go for the next customer. I think that's a good example of how, if you look at Hertz's internal processes, and I feel like I'm overusing our competitor's name in this conversation, but it's a company that we've analyzed really extensively to understand, all right, part of why they have to have this model of I've just rented a standard sedan and I'm going to end up giving my customer a standard sedan is that there's no one looking and saying, this Tesla Model Y that's black, that is a 2022 and has this many miles, has been assigned to this customer and then also this next customer. And therefore, my processes need to adapt to the fact that I need to have this vehicle charged and cleaned so it's ready for this next customer, not this next customer is just going to get whatever vehicle we give to them. And so you need to have software and data that's telling the people that are working in the garage how to prioritize the charging and the cleaning, so that way it is actually ready for that next customer. And I mean, the same can go if you kind of extrapolate out into the view of a week or 2 weeks, and you're planning out all of your reservations, and you have vehicles that might have some sort of damage, or that they need to go in for some sort of maintenance and repair type of situation. How do you actually manage those vehicles in order to be able to either do swaps or ensure that the customer that is reserved a specific Hyundai Ionic 5, that they're actually getting a Hyundai Ionic 5, and coordinating that then with the team that's actually doing the repairs. The traditional rental car companies have not had to worry about that, because again, if I'm just selecting a standard SUV, I'm just getting whatever SUV they happen to hand to me, not guaranteeing that I want that Hyundai Ionic 5 experience, and I don't want to deviate from that experience. And they haven't had to develop any software or data that says, hey, this specific Hyundai Ionic 5 needs to be available on this date for this customer, because they're just going to hand you the keys to whatever SUV is available. So I think looking at how Turo has changed the calculus of how you look at the marketplace, and then having software that's really supporting the internal operations to make sure that customers are getting exactly what they're expecting to get.
So many different intricacies to what you guys are doing, and recall day-to-day conversations that you're receiving about different vehicles. So imagine that optimization process is instrumental towards your own growth. What about scale in its own, whether it's tips towards scaling that you've learned from past ventures, whether it bite mart and anything else, whether it's your actual scaling plans. What are your thoughts towards scale, and how that is accomplished?
I mean, there's a few different components to it. You have your actual operations at a physical location, which you have to figure out how do you optimize that in a way that you're able to bring vehicles in, get vehicles out in a very quick fashion. Then you have the software development piece of it, which is, how do you actually develop software fast enough and that is actually meaningfully helpful to whatever situation you're trying to solve. So you're actually making things better and more optimized. And my background too with what I did at Bytemark is I worked extensively in India. So I had a number of contacts over in India to be able to do software development. And that's not to say that we won't end up using some development solutions here in the US. But from a cost standpoint, and really being able to throw 20 developers at a solution that needs to be developed, it's much easier to scale by having a team that's based out of India that's doing a lot of the back office development work. The same goes with customer service. We have a around the clock type of customer service. Well, as a small operation, I can't afford to have a massive team that's based here in the United States. And so we actually have a team that's based out of Lima, Peru, and then we also have a team that's based over in India. So we have a 24/7 coverage for anybody that's calling, texting, needs some sort of support. And that's helped us scale out because it's at a lower cost and helps keep, margins are relatively tight within a rental car industry. So you need to make sure that you're not, putting so much cost into the overall customer service piece of it, as well as the software development piece, that you're negating any of the margins that you end up getting off of the car rental business. And then again, just trying to automate the process within the garage. We have the capability for a lot of customers who they'll show up at midnight, and I might have one of our team members in India who is checking that customer in, who is unlocking the vehicle for them, who is verifying their ID, and who's saying, great, you're good to go. Here's all the information you needed to exit the garage. And if you have any problems, feel free to reach out to us. I don't think there are really many companies that are structured in a way that they could go and rent a Tesla at, New York is a 24/7 city at midnight, 1 a.m. They can get that car and they can still get that extra level of customer service experience that we want them to have, because we've trained up people even over in India to be able to help kind of walk people through the process of any of the unique attributes of the vehicle, and any of the help that they might need for the vehicle.
So exploring different tactics to lower expenses, increase margins while providing a better customer user experience and allowing for higher volumes of individuals to be transacting with the brand throughout the process.
Exactly. Yep. I mean, because we don't have to be there to unlock every single vehicle. And we're also enabling people that they can lock and unlock a vehicle from the Tesla app themselves. That's the other thing that we've done that's pretty cool is, if you come to New York and, we've had you as either a return renter or somebody that we've verified and that we trust, we're going to give you access to the Tesla app. You can lock and unlock the car and do all of the management of the Tesla yourself. Again, that is a very unique experience compared to if you go and rent from a Hertz, you're not going to be able to download the Tesla app and then all of a sudden access the Tesla from the Tesla app. And most of these cars now, and this includes Mercedes, BMW, Hyundai, you name it, they are becoming more and more app-centric. Well, how are the Hertzes and Avises adapting to this world where vehicle manufacturers are saying the number one way that our customers are interacting with the vehicles is through the mobile app? They aren't. And so that's a big part of what we've developed is this unique user ID experience where we're associating you're a Jules customer, you have access to the Tesla app, you have access to the Mercedes app, and it's time limited for whenever your rental period is, and then it's revoked, and just an automated process for being able to manage that. But it also gives you a much more authentic ownership experience than what you're going to be able to get from a traditional rental car company.
Micah, you make it look easy. And in an industry
You
that's
haven't seen
extremely
me crying
competitive.
underneath my desk on a Saturday night. So
I know that's a commonality. That is a feeling that's been expressed here on the show from entrepreneurs. But again, I know you're fighting in very aggressive industries, car rentals, electric vehicles, the software behind them. So again, I appreciate you coming on here and being able to share the model, what's working, where you guys are expanding. As we begin to wrap up here, any final thoughts you want to leave listeners with? Uh, and where's the best place to get hold of you if anybody listening in would like to continue the discussion?
yeah, I mean, I think there are just so many different opportunities for what we could be able to do with EVs as a fleet and as we continue to grow. Another example where because you have this almost like a super battery pack that you're able to turn around and go to the electric utility in a certain area and say, hey, it's Tuesday and it happens to be a heat wave that's moving through here on Tuesday, but Tuesday also happens to be a slow day for us for rentals. We've got 20 cars here that are fully charged. We're going to plug them into the grid for you. And if you need to pull excess power from these vehicles as part of that, by all means do that. We're starting to see that with buses, particularly if they're buses that operate for school districts, because during the summertime, that's when school buses are not being utilized. If you electrify those buses, you're going to be able to utilize those batteries over the summertime to augment the grid and the power. I think that is an example of various different kind of innovation that you can do with EVs that you were never able to do with a gas car. You're not taking the gas out of a car in order to be able to put it like into a larger fuel system that's supporting the entire grid. All of a
Sure.
sudden now we have an additional revenue generation that we're able to create. So we're actually making thousands of dollars every month from Con Ed here in New York by optimizing when we're charging our vehicles. And I mean, that is happening right now. And so there are just so many different ways that we see utilizing these, again, computers on wheels, batteries on wheels that are plugged into a larger ecosystem that provides so much opportunity for innovation. And we want to develop the software that supports that. Like I said, the margins are tight on EV rentals. Well, if I can find other ways to generate revenue off of that vehicle, in addition to renting it out, I mean, why not? And so we want to be able to explore kind of all these different capabilities of what we could be able to do with these cars, especially as we start to scale out the fleet more and more, which again, I think makes us very attractive from an acquisition standpoint, as well as just, being able to license out the unique technology that we've developed.
And love hearing about the efficiencies, how you guys are using the data and analytics. I say data is only as good as what you do with it, and how you're seeing monetary returns from that, how you're making the grid uh, that much more accessible to other groups accordingly. And again, really applaud everything that you guys do there over at Jules. if anyone's listening in, potential investor, another founder who may be able to share tips, receive tips from you, find different ways to partner, what would be the best way for them to get in contact with you or with Jules as a whole?
Yep. I'm just going to answer it because I know you asked that or just a little bit ago. So wefunder.com/Jules, JOULEZ. That's one of the best ways, but you can also go to drivejules.com. You can also check us out on all the various different social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. I'm very, very accessible and generally, able to hop into a conversation. At least right now, some days I have less bandwidth than others, but being able to just make sure that if anybody wants to learn more about what we're doing, that we're happy to bring on partners and investors if the opportunities there.
And highly recommend that you do so. Micah, want to thank you so much for taking the time to hop on the podcast today. I know listeners are going to get a lot out of it. And for the audience, thanks for tuning in today. We'll look forward to seeing you on our next episode.